Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa, Mesa. My name is Brian Perez, and if you're listening to this program on the radio on Monday afternoon or anytime after August 25th, we are not live. We recorded this program on August 25th. In fact, if you're watching us live right now on Facebook or YouTube on the 25th, man, Christmas is only 4 months away. Anyway, squirrel.
It's going to get cold.
Yes. Anyway, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube on Thursday, you can call us with your questions at 88... never mind. Not going to give you the number. It's right there on the bottom of your screen. You see it. You can call us. But everybody on hold will get to you as soon as we can. Everybody listening on the radio, we will be live again tomorrow, so you can call us with your questions then. Answering your questions today, we've got Brian Brodersen, the senior pastor of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California. Bobby Conway, the 1-minute apologist from YouTube, was with us last week, Tuesday through Thursday, so he's with us in the studio one more time before he flies back home to North Carolina. And joining us on Skype, speaking of flying, Phil Metzger, who's been all over the world. Well, maybe not all over the world, but Phil, it is good to see you. We haven't had you on the program in about 3 weeks now, so welcome back. How's it going?
Yeah, good. It's good to see you guys. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah. By the way, Phil is the pastor of Calvary San Diego, so he's here on Skype, and we'll get to your calls as soon as we can. But so what have you been up to in the last 3 weeks?
Yeah, good question. First of all, Bobby, Christmas time, come to San Diego, bro. It'll be nice, and it'll be like 68 degrees on Christmas Day. So
just invite me, bro. I'm there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. It was so easy.
You need somebody to speak on Christmas Day morning, right? So
yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So a little update. Yeah, I was gone. I've been gone. I think it's either 2 or 3 weeks off the show. I flew over after a service on Sunday. I flew over to Krakow, Poland, and met up with a couple other guys, and we drove over to Ukraine and spent 2 weeks in the country of Ukraine.
Wow.
We were driving around west, central, and east, as far east as we could go. Mm-hmm. You know, we've got, I think it's 18 Calvary churches in Ukraine. And so we kind of went on what I was calling like an encouragement tour, just to go around to all of our nationals that could not, that did not leave the country. And our people are discouraged. It's now 6 months of this war happening. Yep. And we just really wanted to go over, see what the needs were 6 months in, see how people are doing, go to as many of the churches as we could, and share. Every other night or almost every night, we were driving all day. We'd get there and have worship, have prayer, have a little message, and of course, eat a lot of great food. So it was it's a mixed trip. Great to see everybody. Really great to see people. Heartbreaking to see the country. Heartbreaking to know so many people, or of people that are either fighting or that have died because of this war. So it's kind of a mixed thing. I was really glad to be there. But pretty heartbreaking what's been happening. So a lot of the churches that we have are in places that are now, kind of famous places, cities that are being bombed on the regular. If you're familiar with on the news, there's a power plant in a city called Zaporizhia. Mm-hmm. And of course, the missions pastor there at Costa Mesa was one of the guys that started and taught at that church for a long time, John Chubik. And so, a lot of these places are very sentimental to a lot of us, but now, of course, are the front lines of a pretty devastating war. So good to pray with people, good to see people, really good to be home.
Speaking of prayer, if you guys want to pray for the churches in Ukraine, you can go to calvarychapel.com, use the Church Finder feature, type in Ukraine. You don't even type it in. You just use it from the drop-down menu there, and you will see the churches that are there in the area that you can pray for.
So Phil, it's great to have you back. I'm glad you're in one piece.
Yes.
So is there any light at the end of the tunnel? What's the feeling amongst our friends? Obviously, understandably, there's a ton of discouragement and so forth. But any bright spots in the midst of the darkness.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say definitely. In terms of the big picture of any light at the end of the tunnel, God only knows, truly,
right?
Obviously. But, I was really surprised. A couple things. One, I hadn't really been, I was in Ukraine when the war, right when the war began. But, when it's all that was going on, I wasn't really paying attention to the infrastructures around me and the life around me. It was pretty chaotic. This time going back, I was really surprised. It had been 5 years since I'd really been in the country. I cannot tell you how much they have become like a modern European country in those 5 years. I kid you not. I was shocked at the buildup of this place all over the country. And I'm saying that because that was one of the things that surprised me and really did bring me a lot of hope. And kind of on a national level, everything was open. Anything that could be open was open. I had some of the best food I've had. I know that sounds so ridiculous, but we went to restaurants, we went to coffee shops, we went out in the parks and walked around. And I'm saying that to say it's not like people are not being vigilant. They're being very thoughtful, very, very careful. But they're also kind of telling the aggressor, Russia, we're going to keep living our life. You're not going to take this. The very thing that you're trying to take, we're going to keep doing. We're going to live, and we have good lives here, and we're going to live those lives. That resilience was super inspiring. On the Christian side, I would say this. One of the things we tried to do was really to just gather, keep in mind, right before the war started, there was this like global pandemic, right? COVID. So they literally went from a global pandemic of 2 years of a lockdown, very difficult time for many of those cities, right into war. Yeah. People were completely like discombobulated. There was no connection, no, how are you doing in that city way over there? So what we tried to do was gather pastors and leaders together from as far and wide as we could. And we probably did that 4 or 5 times. It was so encouraging. They were so excited to see each other, a lot of just tears of happiness to be together again. And I would say that they're unified. I think that's the thing I got a lot of hope out of, that they have a very clear vision of they're fighting for their freedom, and they're also fighting to win the soul of this country. They want people to know Christ. They haven't lost that perspective, but they're doing it in a way that is very like contextual to wartime. And I was totally inspired. They kept saying, we're so glad you guys came. I kept saying, man, I'm so glad I came. This is so inspiring. Yeah. And I think a lot of church planting is going to come out of this. I think a lot of people, more importantly, are going to be born again from this. I got to tell you this, and I'll stop ranting. I went to one of our churches very much in the front line of where things are happening. And only 3 people, there was 3 young people that met us, and young at the, I'm 48, so young is anything below that now. So they were relatively young, and we were like, oh, we're so glad to see you guys here. Turns out they're the only 3 from the original church from 6 months ago. Everybody who could flee did. They decided to stay and open their church as a humanitarian crisis center. And we were there on a Sunday morning. Well, 80 people showed up. 80 people. All of them had whiter hair than me. So I felt good. I felt good about myself. I felt young. No, I think the median age was like 74. I'm not joking. Wow. And it was the people who could not flee. They couldn't get out. They were pretty much stuck. Yeah. And when this center opened up for them, they started getting their flour, their coffee, their food, their fruits, their veggies from there, and they all started getting saved. Wow. And it was like 80 of these like 80-year-olds who are all loving Jesus, worshiping. That's beautiful. We brought with us a young girl who was 25 years old. Her dad was one of the former pastors of a Calvary in Kyiv. Her name is Margot. And she has an amazing story herself of being trapped by the Russians. And there she is, 25, leading worship. And she's like, let's all sing, whoa, 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 whatever. I was laughing. Here's this 80-year-old crowd. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Everybody's getting into it. But it was an amazing thing to see how much God is saving people in this, really difficult time.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bobby?
Well, the only question that I had, maybe just to update our audience, we don't hear about this war nearly as much as we did on the front end. And I guess my question would be, is it still as intense as it's been? Is it slowing down? Is it getting more intense and we're just not aware? And what's the best way for us to stay attuned to what's going on?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Bobby. Hard to, yeah, okay. I could quantify it like this. It's worse than it's ever been. It's at a harder season and stage because, but the difference for most people, for the average like civilian, the difference is this. The shock and awe that Russia tried to do in the first week by trying to conquer the capital of Kiev, trying to move and take over. Everybody thought, oh, it'll be over in 3-4 days.
Yeah.
That's gone. That sense of like, they're going to wipe us all out in one fair swoop is gone. So in one sense, that's a better thing. On the other hand, the trenches are really dug in. It's been a long time, maybe World War II, since the world fought the way they are right now, where there's distinguished lines. There's distinct lines. This is Ukraine. This is the Russian side where they're fighting from. And that basically covers most of the southeast, all the way around the east, and most of the northeast. And so you're talking about a massive part of the country. Spending time with the people caught in between the two, it is, heartbreaking. We cried like we haven't cried in a long time. Heartbreaking what they're going through. So I would say, tune into things like BBC, tune into, Sky News, get onto European news because they'll talk about it more. I don't think it's because America doesn't care. I think we do care, but there's always something new happening. There's always something else happening. I think it's hard to keep up with what's really going on there. But I would honestly say this is as much of a devastating moment in the war as it's ever been. This nuclear power plant almost, guys, over there, we're talking about, we weren't that far away from that area. And they're talking about like global catastrophe, 10 times worse than Chernobyl if the Russians continue to bomb that particular area. Things are on a very precocious position right now. And so I hope that kind of answers it. It's hard to get good information right now, though, truly.
Yeah.
Wow. Crazy.
Yes,
crazy stuff. But man, great job going over and encouraging the folks. And we've mentioned on the program that we had just a few weeks ago as well, we had a number of workers come together at our facility in Austria for just a time of encouragement and refreshing and some counseling and things like that. So yeah, we're still right in the thick of things. Over the several months, we've had many of you who have contributed financially, and that's very much appreciated. We can still use donations, Phil. I'm sure that there still are needs, right? That money's going to help with some of the needs.
Yeah, I spent time in a village just outside of Kyiv, and it became very famous. We've heard of it. It's this village called Bucha.
Yeah.
Bucha and Boryanka, and where real massacres occurred. And beyond just that, people's lives are just devastated. And every apartment building destroyed, everything. And we have a little group of our believers are in that little village. Wow. So we're really taking it on ourselves to try to rebuild some of their homes. Winter is coming and heating is everything. As Bobby said for Christmas in North Carolina, it's going to be cold. It's going to be real cold in Ukraine. Ukraine gets devastatingly cold. And Europe is deathly afraid right now of what's going to happen with gas prices and not getting Russian oil and gas. It's going to be a very, very difficult winter. So your giving really helps us. We're actually working with Samaritan's Purse and a few government agencies they're working on building furnaces that can be brought into people's homes that don't choke up carbon monoxide and kill everybody in the home. But we're working on building these things and prototyping them. And check this out, having them all built in Ukraine. We want to get it all done. This country has all the resources, but we want to help fund that and get as many of those furnaces into people's homes and, storage containers, whatever they sleep in. We want to try to keep them warm and keep them alive through the winter.
Oh, great.
You can give towards the effort at the Calvary San Diego website, calvarysd.com/Ukraine relief, calvarysd.com/Ukraine Ukraine relief will take you right to the page where you can give. All right. We're not live today on Pastor's Perspective. This episode recorded on August 25th. But if you're on hold right now, we'll try to get to as many of you as we can with the questions that have been held over from Thursday. So we're going to start with Daniel in California. What did you want to know, Daniel?
So I was reading Leviticus earlier today, and specifically the part where the Bible mentions that there's certain animals in the ocean that we're not supposed to eat. My question is, what is your interpretation of that specific part of the Bible?
Is it okay to eat lobster and things like that? Bobby? Or can we only eat trail mix like Pastor Brian over there?
Yeah, well, in the Bible, under the Old Covenant, if you were going to eat from the sea, you're eating something that has scales and it's finned. What happens is that can really confuse us when we're looking at some of the bizarre dietary laws that are taking place. But these weren't without a point. The dietary laws that were put in place were meant to demonstrate things as it relates to, like God would use, a lot of illustrations. And so the food could serve as an illustration, for example. So Ezekiel is a prophet. Lay on your side for, over a year, flip over, lay on your side for 40 days. There are different types of things that God does to illustrate a point. And foods were set up to illustrate cleanness and uncleanness. And that was kind of the point of that. So it wasn't necessary to say in and of itself that the food is toxic, so to speak. But there were particular foods that were rendered clean and unclean. And God did that with a lot of things, calling his people to separate themselves in order to be holy, which means to be set apart. Well, you fast forward, Daniel, and you come over to Acts chapter 10, and Peter's on the rooftop, and he sees this vision of unclean food. And he is told from the Lord to rise, kill, and eat. And Peter, as a Jew, says, I've never eaten anything unclean. And basically, he's told, do not call unclean what I have made clean. And all of a sudden, the point becomes very clear to us that the unclean foods, so to speak, represent those that are outside of God's vision, outside of God's nation and national promises under the Old Covenant. But then in the New Testament, don't call unclean what I've made clean. That is to say, he is going to take the gospel to those who were considered unclean, to like the Samaritans and other Gentiles. And so what happens right after that vision? He hears a knock at his door from people that want him to go with them to a God-fearing Gentile who would have been considered unclean and they wouldn't associate with. So all that to say, when you're reading a book like Leviticus, it's really easy for us to get sidetracked with some of the bizarre things that are happening, like applying blood to your ear or your toe or these types of things. Well, there's really rich meanings behind that, and it's for illustrative purposes. And so God would use blood and unclean animals and clean animals and use that kind of language to point to the greater picture that would ultimately make sense at the cross.
Any thoughts, Brian?
Yes, I had a thought, but...
and a senior moment.
And yes, the thought has left my mind. So Phil talked about all the great food he ate. I was just wondering if it was all clean or if he ate any unclean food.
Only clean food. Only clean food, buddy.
Does this help you, Daniel?
Yes, it does. I only bring it up because my family, it's something that we cook regularly, and I'm not a fan of seafood. Like I like fish, but there's certain seafoods that I can't stomach.
So you were hoping to use this as an excuse to not eat that food,
Yeah,
huh?
Mom, don't cook this anymore.
unbiblical.
Yeah. But it's okay, Daniel. If you don't want to eat it, just don't eat it because I'm with you on some of those things.
Well, the thing about unclean food, to take about like for people that want to get big on this, right?
Yeah.
Well, but they'll go get queso and some chips or a big fat cheeseburger with fried onion rings. You want to talk about unclean food? I mean, we can go there.
And one other thing, Bobby, you mentioned Acts chapter 10, but Mark chapter 7, Mark actually tells us kind of a little comment on something that Jesus did. There is that he pronounced all foods clean. So from the time of the New Testament onward, those restrictions no longer apply.
Good point.
And so we don't. I mean, you can think about them, you can read them. I mean, there's some things I think. Yes, thank you, Lord, for saying that was unclean, because I don't know why anybody would want. Who wants to eat a bat? Tell me. Anybody want to eat a bat?
No comment.
I mean, I just don't want to eat a bat. I just and there are so many. A mole. Who wants to eat a mole? I don't want to eat a mole. I don't want to eat spiders. I don't want to eat any of those things. So I am very thankful for the Levitical law in many places.
But when you really think about it and you see a cow walking around, like
who wants to eat a cow? That's true when you put it in that light. I was listening to this story of these missionaries in Papua New Guinea, and they were, one of the regular delicacies for the people was termites. And they would just get termites and grubs, and they'd mix them all together. And they were talking about how the missionaries, in order to really engage the people, until they ate with them,
he'd have a bag of termites.
They were not going to listen to you if you're not going to sit down and eat with them.
Right.
So would you would you kind of sport a salted bag of termites over a movie instead of popcorn?
As I was listening to this, I was thinking, man, thank you, Lord, that you never called me to that place.
Yeah.
But Phil, you've been to Africa, and I think you have eaten
exotic foods,
certain insects that, right? I mean, remember we had some friends that lived in Africa, and they chocolate-covered grasshoppers was their favorite delicacy. I mean, they'd buy bags of them.
You can't knock it till you try it, buddy. Those things are good. Oh man, termites.
So do you have a stomach of steel? Can you try all kinds of stuff, Phil?
I mean, this is when people tell me about how they pray for their meal here in America, they don't understand. Like, I pray for my meals when I'm, like I just believe God and eat it.
Oh my goodness!
And I've never had any problems. Yeah,
have you ever had a badger burger?
I have not. And when that I was laughing, people that weren't watching would notice when Brian was like, I don't want to eat any paws. And he's like, a bat. I was like, that was not the animal I thought he would go to, but that was beautiful. And a mole. And I was thinking, I don't want to eat those either. They don't seem good. They don't seem good.
Where you lived for a long time, they did eat some pretty interesting things. I remember my first trip into that part of the world, and they served us some looked like chicken noodle soup. And it was, but it was chicken foot noodle soup. And I remember biting into the claw of a chicken and thinking, what is this doing in my soup? And one of the local guys go, give me that. And, he just grabbed it and gobbled it right down, just ate like everything.
I mean, it's like a toothpick and food at the same time. It's like a toothpick and food. So
That's all right. So bad.
So Daniel, it's not as bad. Eating seafood, I guess, is not as bad as having mole and bat and
lobster,
badger.
Daniel.
What do you think, man?
Yeah, it actually sounds compared to what you guys are talking about.
Yeah, bro.
That's kind of mild.
Yes.
Hey, okay, I have one more story.
Okay.
One more story. When I used to live in London, I lived right along the Thames River. And I would go, walking along the river in the evenings, and there would be a group of guys fishing. And I like fishing and, fish and everything. And I'd go up and just say, what are you guys catching? And I'd look in the bucket, and it's a bucket full of eels.
Ugh.
And of course,
ugly buggers.
These are just they're a delicacy for Londoners. They just love eels. They love jelly eels, and I just look at those things and think, no, Do not eat that. Throw that back in the
Oh,
river.
man. Yes.
I just crossed London off my bucket list.
Well,
I mean, I've always wanted to go to London, and
you don't have to.
well, I
eat
guess
the
I don't have
eels,
to.
you
You're
know.
right, but
The whole
somebody
new
could.
meaning to fish and chips.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, no, they do not do eel and chips. Thank God.
Man,
All right.
Daniel, thanks for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Let's go to Joe in California. How can we help you, Joe?
Hi, pastors. This is my first time calling. Please bear with me. My heart is racing. I don't know what is going to occur after this question. You guys were talking about mental health earlier, and I've been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and PTSD. I'm a combat veteran from the Iraqi War, 2003. And my family is struggling. My wife left me for another man because of my mental illnesses. And you guys were talking about demon possession. My question is, I talked to my pastor last night, and I've been suffering from chronic pain that doctors can't figure out. I struggle with anger, with certain situations. I go to church, I read my Bible, I pray all day. Every day, all day, I'm struggling with pain and thoughts that I shouldn't be thinking of biblically. I have no peace. Yeah, I pray to Jesus, I believe in Jesus, and I don't know what to do.
Wow. Brian, what do you tell Joe?
Well, Joe, God bless you. I mean, this sounds, very challenging, very difficult. To answer, I want to answer one aspect of your question very specifically and clearly, that PTSD is a real thing, schizophrenia is a real thing, and they are both not demon possession. So sometimes people...
I'm taking medications, monthly medication, where for the last 7 years since this has been occurring since I got out of combat. And PTSD, yes, my friends are struggling. I lost one friend to suicide. And that's what triggered me to start seeking help 7 years ago after my wife left me. God's been encouraging me as far as me not giving up. And I don't want to give up, but my mom is already drew the line and said, one more outburst and you have to move away.
Oh, my gosh.
And, and it's tough for my family. My dad understands a little bit better, but it's really tough on my family. Because,
now, you sound, everything's clear. Your thinking is clear. Your communication is clear right now. So you're on medication for the schizophrenia?
Yes, but even with the schizophrenia medication, a couple of days ago, my doctor is going to increase and switch to an additional medication to see if that'll help.
Yeah.
But I thought the voices were like demons, like the devil tempting me, or these thoughts were just my thoughts and they were just negative. But all day, every day, I hear these thoughts. I think these thoughts. One time I disappeared and I didn't even know where I was. I lost a lot of weight, like 40 pounds, because I wasn't eating. I had no idea where I was. I was in the middle of the wilderness eating cactus because I had no food. I remember that, but then I blacked out and I couldn't see anything anymore. I went unconscious, but not unconscious, excuse me. I couldn't see anything. I went blind, kind of, like Paul. And I know that something happened because I saw some stuff that I cannot explain. And I know that the Bible says, I want to believe the Bible and nothing else. I don't want to be confused by the devil, the demons, or anything like that.
Well, two things I would say, Joe. Stay close to your church and the Christians, and don't feel at all ashamed to ask for prayer. And even if they have a prayer list, ask if you can be on the prayer list. When you go to church, ask your pastor or pastors, would you just please pray for me, pray that God will help me, pray that God will, bring me through this. And then the second thing is stay close to your doctor, listen to your doctor's advice, let them know like you're doing. Try, either a different dosage or maybe a different medication. Not every medication is going to work exactly the same for everybody. And so maybe, there is that right fit for you that's going to help you through a lot of this stuff. But our hearts go out to you, brother, and just know that Jesus loves you. Lean on him, and he's going to bring you through.
Everybody listening, please put Joe from Hemet on your prayer list. Thanks for calling us today, man. God bless you. This is Pastor's Perspective. Going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more of your questions. Stand by. This pre-recorded edition of Pastor's Perspective continues now. Thank you very much for listening and for watching on Facebook and YouTube. My name is Brian Perez. We've got Brian Brodersen, Bobby Conway, and Phil Metzger answering your questions. As I said, we're not live, so don't call us with your questions today. Unless you're watching on Facebook or YouTube on Thursday, the 25th, you can call us. The number's right there on the bottom of your screen. But everybody else, write down your question so you don't forget it, and then call us tomorrow. All right, I want to go to a call here that kind of correlates to a Facebook question that we have, so I think we'll do both at the same time. Christina wrote in and says, there is an openly gay couple that has been attending my church for a while. Should the pastor and church be accepting of them, even if we know it's a sin? This question is actually from my husband. He wants to leave the church we attend because he has seen a gay couple and someone wearing a rainbow love shirt. Our church teaches that marriage should be between man and woman, but my husband seems to think they aren't talking about it enough. I'm thinking my husband would only be happy if this was talked about in every service. So here on the phone, we've got Dave in California. For all we know, Dave, you're Christina's husband? Is that you? Dave, are you there? Dave. Okay, Dave's not there. So anyway, so we read the question. How would you respond, Phil?
Yeah, wow. That's
Christina's husband thinks
they might need to go see somebody and talk about these things. Yeah.
Phil,
okay.
Phil, welcome back to California.
Yeah.
I know you weren't asked these questions in Ukraine.
No,
welcome
I was
back
not.
to California.
Yeah.
No, I was not. There was more there. Yeah. No, I was not asked these questions. I got so many things though that in my heart I'd want to say. So I'll just start and say a few things and let other people talk. But I think that something has really gone awry in our just as a culture when the idea of acceptance means I have to I can't be loving anymore. I can't just be a gracious human being. I can't be a kind Christian that just says, hey, this is where, if somebody's homosexual or it's a gay couple that are in our church, acceptance, for one group of people, acceptance means that I am theologically accepting that the way that they live is okay before God. But for, I think, most of the world, the idea of acceptance is simply that my judgment of how they are living it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't change anything. So I think we have to decide what is the approach that we want to come at in order to help people. Our goal is to be missional, which means to bring the love of Jesus to the world around us. So we ask ourselves questions like, is my rejection outright? I can't hear anything. I can't be around anybody. Is that going to lead to people hearing about the love of God and the need for him through repentance? Or is there another way? So if somebody, I'll be very clear, theologically and scripturally, the Bible is very clear on the topic that about homosexuality. But then putting that aside and saying, do I treat people who maybe are politically of one persuasion, maybe very conservative, but there's a toxicity that comes with that. And yet we seem to not have a problem with that in a lot of our Christian churches today. So it seems a bit hypocritical to be against the homosexual couple, but to embrace the conservative that maybe aren't living under the grace of God. You can be conservative and not be Christian, and yet we seem to be okay with that. So I think our standards are a little bit skewed. We need to realign ourselves to the heart of God. Acceptance does not have to mean and should not mean that I can't be a loving, gracious, kind human being who creates relationship whereby I can actually have meaningful conversation with people who think differently than I do. It's not going to happen by me having a torch and a pitchfork at them. It just won't work.
Bobby, thoughts?
Well, I mean, isn't it incredible the amount of questions that are popping up on this on the radio show? They're coming more and more, and it makes sense because we're wondering, how do we move forward in this new context that we're in? And so agreeing with Phil that we can accept people without agreeing with their lifestyle, that's just part of a posture of love. At the same token, I think that in the church, if I was to have a homosexual couple come in, I'd want them to know that they're absolutely welcome, that we're glad that they're here. But I would also say we are unashamedly going to teach that we believe the Bible is between a husband and wife in the context of marriage. And I would want them to know that I hope that you hear this in a tone of love, but know that as I see you in the audience, that my heart is hoping that you will come into alignment with what God would have for you. And so that is my passion. And so you're putting yourself in a context under a leadership team that disagrees with the choice that you've made. At the same token, we are willing to have you here. We're glad you're here. We'll have dinner with you. We'll talk with you. We'll spend time with you. We'll dialogue with you. But there will be limitations about how far you can go in serving in this church as well. As a caller called up last week and saying, hey, we've got a same-sex female couple, and now they've come into the church and they're wanting to use their worship gifts in the church. Mm-hmm. And so I would rather be up front with people than in the name of love mislead them to think that I actually agree with them. So I think it's really important that they hear our stance.
Yeah. That was on the August 24th program, in case anybody wants to go back and listen to it.
Yeah, and I think that's so critical, because I think and I know I've heard same-sex attracted or married or whatever. I've heard people say, well, they kind of like led us on. They led us to believe that we were as welcome as anybody else. We could participate in everything, and then suddenly they started putting up these sort of restrictions. So I think, Bobby, that, we just have to be clear up front that, hey, we love you. God loves you. God's got a plan for your life. But we're going to stand on Scripture, and Scripture is clear that this lifestyle is not a lifestyle that God's going to bless or honor. And I think everybody that compromises on that, they regret it in the end. They either swing all the way over to being affirming, or they find themselves just in a mess trying to figure out how do we get out of this thing that we've created now,
Yeah.
Phil?
Yeah, I just adding to that, like we've seen churches make that approach, right? Where they're just like, hey, you're good, we're good, it's all good. And then people feel duped. Mm-hmm. And I just want to kind of just reiterate the same idea. Yeah. So in fact, what I've, living in an inner city and pastoring an inner city church in Budapest, Hungary, we had so many people who had come through who were figuring out their sexuality or very clearly believed what they believed. And it was very common where I would just say to them, listen, this is who we are. This is how but just know, if we're doing our job well, everybody's going to be offended at our church at one point because all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God.
That's
so
true.
I think we're equal opportunity offenders here. You're going to get offended. And gosh, I hope I offend myself because the scriptures tell me that I need Christ. So I think we can do things to like diffuse this feeling of like, you're the black sheep of this group. We all need the Lord, and we're going to be honest with people. So I just wanted to reiterate, I really appreciate you guys saying that. It's important.
Good stuff.
Yeah, and I think, today we never got to Dave's question because he
fell asleep or something. Dave, are you back? Dave's not there.
Dave's not there.
Dave forgot that he called in.
Yes, he did hold for a long time. Sorry, Dave.
But,
since Thursday.
Yeah, got tired.
Going back to Dave's question.
Dave says that what he was going to ask, he thinks that it wasn't asked or that it's not talked about as much.
Enough. And I think, this is, again, I think that if we get up every week and just talk about homosexuality, same-sex, then we are neglecting to talk about a whole bunch of other issues and sins. I think it's Leviticus, is it 18? Somewhere around Leviticus 18. I went through and I'm looking at, because it's all dealing with all the sexual sin issues. 13 of those are in the context of heterosexual relations. One of them is homosexual relations, and one of them is relations with animals. Mm-hmm. So I thought, there's plenty of heterosexual sexual sin to be addressed and to talk about. But we don't want to just camp out and talk about, my job, our job, guys, this, our job is to preach the text. If the text, or if the bigger context of the text, if it's there, then that's where we're going to go, and we're going to address it. We're not going to shy away from it. But I don't want to try to incorporate anything into my Sunday sermon on a regular basis because I think, well, this is what we need to be, talking about. This is what we need to be hitting on. That's imbalanced.
And this is where it can be good in a church to create maybe a cultural apologetics class that addresses kind of the 5, 6, 7 hot topics that are going on in the culture, and then allow that course to be taught once or twice a year, have some roundtables for people to get together and dialogue. So we're being responsible. We're creating a context for these types of things to be addressed, but we're also making sure that we're not doing what you're saying.
Yeah.
Speaking of what Bobby just said, I love what Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa is going to start doing on Wednesday nights in the middle of September. Why don't you tell people about that, Brian?
Yeah, we're moving. We've had a midweek study, forever and ever, which has been, going through the Bible or going through books of the Bible, and so we're going to take a little bit of a different direction. We're gonna set up more. It's called The Gathering, and then subtitle is Courses for Everyday Discipleship. So we're going to be offering a number of options, and we're going to be offering classes. It's going to be more like a kind of a classroom type of a situation, not a sterile classroom type of a situation, but it'll be, I think we have 6 or 7 different courses coming up this first time around. And we're going to be talking about everything from biblical languages to spiritual formation, to how to manage your finances, to, just a number of different topics. I'm going to be teaching a class on words that every Christian should know. There's as Christians, we inherit a new vocabulary. We go into Scripture and we start finding words that we don't normally use, and they're very significant words. They mean things theologically that we need to know. So we're going to be talking about that. And so, just a bit of a different approach coming up here in the fall.
So you can find out more at cccm.com under events. Look for the gathering. It begins on September 21st. All right, Christina, thanks for sending in your question. Dave, wherever you are, I hope you heard the answer to the question. I don't even know if, Dave, you're Christina's husband, but just based on the question on the screen, it led me to believe that maybe it was Christina's husband. I don't know. All right, Tanner, welcome to Pastor's Perspective. How can we help you?
Yes, good afternoon, Pastor. Thank you for taking my call. How are you guys today?
Good, thank you.
So my question has to do with kind of sharpening up my eschatology. Matthew chapter 24 and Mark 13 would be the scriptures in question. I'm not sure if you guys, you read, scriptures that you've read over and over, and then you just kind of pass by it again. You see something that you maybe haven't seen before, kind of the situation. And question has to do with the rapture and specifically the pre-tribulation rapture viewpoint. And just kind of qualify preface my question. My church background that I've been involved in, like maybe the past 10 years, has kind of been like a Calvary Chapel kind of usually like a pre-tribulation viewpoint. Obviously, this is like a secondary issue. It's not a vital to salvation theological issue, but. So Matthew chapter 24, verse 29, talks about...
Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken.
Yes, and verse 30 is obviously talking about the coming of Christ, the sign of you'll see the sign of the Son of Man coming on the clouds, and the angels will gather. So a parallel, now just kind of like my tradition, just kind of what I've been taught, and, from hearing sermons and pastors, traditionally it's been kind of told to me that, that chapter kind of applies to the Jews. If you read the chapter, it's really applying to the Jews, doesn't necessarily apply to us, the Gentiles. However, the parallel passage, Mark 13, Mark 13 is it's just Mark's account of literally like the same,
right?
It's even word for word the same. However, the only detail in Mark's account, Mark 13, verse 37. So the only difference between the Matthew 24, Matthew's account, and Mark's account, there's only one little detail.
And that is?
Mark, verse 37, that he...
what I say to you, I say to all, watch.
Yes. So that would kind of imply that he's not just saying that to just the Jews, but obviously the signs of the times, the earthquakes, the false prophets, the signs of the times, and of course his coming would apply to all of us, not just the Jews. And so...
So your question is...
Would this kind of ruin my whole pre-tribulation belief?
Brian.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how firmly convinced you are of your pre-tribulation belief. It doesn't ruin my pre-tribulation belief. And so, and not everybody in this room necessarily believes in a pre-tribulational rapture. So we agree that this is not it's not an essential. It's not anything to divide over. I think that there are, to understand the timing of the rapture, I will say right up front, I don't think it's as simple as some people think it is. And of course, if it was that simple, we would not have any debate over it. But I do think that my understanding of the rapture, I don't so much draw from Matthew 24 or Mark 13 or Luke 21 for that matter. But I draw more from Paul's letters, and I think that the 1 Corinthians 15 and the 1 Thessalonians 4 and 2 Thessalonians 2, I think, to me, those are the places where you're going to get, of course, the fact that there's a rapture. We will not sleep, but we shall be changed. 1 Corinthians, 1 Thessalonians, we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. But then when you go to 2 Thessalonians, I think you actually do have more of a time frame for the rapture in relation to the tribulation. And so so all I'm saying is that's where I would draw from, not from the Olivet Discourse that is recorded there in those synoptic Gospels.
Tanner, thanks for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Now we're going to go to Tina in California. How can we help you, Tina?
Hi, I have a question of where to go from here. I had a long-term marriage of 35 years, and I wasn't a Christian when I got married, and so our lives have dramatically changed in different directions. And I've lately kind of been reading some stuff and had time to read and process. My children have moved out. I had one with health issues, so she just moved out 2 years ago. But I never thought about being happy in a marriage because I just survived it. And I realize that my husband he's very argumentative, and so I've been getting help, like maybe listening to some Christian podcast or whatever, but I stopped explaining myself, defending, engaging, and he's just very argumentative and has alcohol issues and bipolar and different things, but I'm just not happy being treated this way anymore. And I've always been afraid to leave, and I just feel like I'm just stuck, and I just really don't want to live my life this way anymore. I don't know if I should what to read a book or what.
Tina,
I know that sounds.
I just had a question about. Did you recently become a Christian? How long have you been a Christian?
No, I've been a Christian 30 years.
Okay.
35-year marriage. So.
Okay. So when you first got married, you weren't a Christian, but you became a Christian. Okay.
Yeah, and it seemed like he was nicer then, and we had things in common, like exercise and drinking alcohol. But then I became a Christian. I changed, and but I think he's just always had these issues, but he's grown older and just wants to do more music and alcohol and pot and stuff. And I just that's not me, but I would be okay with that if he was nice to me, but he's just not nice to me, and I just don't even want to be around him. I try to avoid him, but he kind of where are you going? And I'm not hopeful that he's going to change because he's already a Christian. So I can't, he's already invited Jesus into his heart after I did, but I never saw a change.
Yeah, well, that's the key right there. So
yeah, never saw any fruit or change.
Yeah, he's a Christian in name only, but not in reality.
Right.
If you
can't get him saved,
if you said,
I can't say, "Oh, you need Jesus."
Well, you could maybe, but if you said to him, we really need to get some help. I can't keep living like this. We need to go see a counselor. How would he respond? Would he agree?
Maybe, but I don't want to waste my time. I think he thinks that I'm the one that's not loving, and I don't do this because he kind of had said that in the past. Like, what do you do for me?
Yeah,
because I didn't work. I raised a kid, so it's more like I don't do that for him.
Yeah, but I think it's certainly not going to change unless you make some kind of move. And I would think that would be at least a place to start, because if he might just say, no, I don't want to do that. And then, then you figure out, where do I go from here? But maybe he surprises you and says, let's go talk to somebody so they can tell you how wrong you are and me how right I am. Some people think that way. And then he might be surprised to get in there and find out, he's not as right as he thought he was. So all I'm saying is I would encourage you to make a step toward doing something to change the situation. And the something is not, I'm out of the marriage at this point. You might end up out of the marriage. But at this point, I would say, why don't you just approach him and say, we can't keep living this way. I'm not happy. You're obviously not happy. Let's try to get some help, and let's see if we can get in to see a counselor.
Yeah. Now, something Tina mentioned, that she doesn't think she can talk to him and tell him that he needs Jesus because he's already saved. Yeah. He already knows Jesus.
Yeah.
It doesn't,
Well, he doesn't know Jesus. It's obvious. Because you don't know Jesus and behave the way he's behaving. So he's got a misunderstanding of what it is to know Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But, maybe she's not the one to say that to him. Sometimes, some people can say that to you and some people can't, right?
Yeah.
So, I think you guys weigh in here if you got any other thoughts, but I think it's a little bit of it's a tiny step that I think, it could possibly end up positive, to just say, we got to get help, and let's go talk to somebody.
Phil?
I think I was just going to say, I think the danger for her right now is, I just want to be done.
Yeah.
I just want to be done. I tried everything. I just want to be done. And unfortunately, and this is not a reflection of you, Tina, directly, but we've all heard as pastors, people come in for counseling and just kind of like, just tell me that it's okay for me to be done. I don't really want to work towards, healing and all. And, probably Tina has put in a lot of years of trying, and you just get to the end. I get it. But maybe if there's never been any counseling, Brian's so right. This would be a great starting point. And maybe not the kind of counseling where you say, tell him everything that's wrong with him, but genuinely, I want to grow. I want you to grow. Let's see if there's a way to heal this marriage.
Tina, thanks for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. There's that music that says we're out of time. Ugh. We'll be back tomorrow, though. So give us a call. If we didn't get to your call today, try again tomorrow. We will be here between 3 and 4 p.m. Pacific time. God bless you guys. For Brian Brodersen, Phil Metzger, and Bobby Conway. Bobby, good seeing you again, man. When are you going to be back?
Not too long. 6, 7, 8 weeks.
6, 7, 8 weeks. That seems like an eternity. So if you can get here sooner, even better. Anyway, have a good day. Talk to you later. Pastor's Perspective is sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.